Tonight we're going to discuss with Dr. Les Linet, a psychiatrist, movement disorders.
Hi, I'm Les Linet. I am a physician specializing in child and adolescent psychiatry, board certified in that, and also in adult psychiatry, and licensed to practice in New Jersey and New York. We're going to talk about movement disorders. The most dramatic and famous one is Tourette syndrome, and it's most famous for one of its symptoms, which I want to emphasize is not always present and not necessary to make the diagnosis, but it's the one that draws the most interest and fascination. The condition is Tourette syndrome. The symptom that I'm referring to is called coprolalia. That's the involuntary swearing. But what is involved with Tourette syndrome is multiple motor tics and vocal tics. The vocal tics do not have to be swearing. They don't have to be words even. They can be little sounds like and motor tics are stereotyped, meaning it's the same movement done over and over. Doesn't have to be one right after another, but you see the same twitch, the same shoulder shrug, and it becomes part of who that person is. They keep doing that.
What's the youngest you've seen, or most people have seen, a diagnosis of Tourette's type syndromes?
Well, tics are not uncommon, but in young children, but often they are transient. Often pediatricians will tell the family, don't worry about it, it'll go away. And they're often right. Once a tic lasts for a year, it's generally lifelong, and it's then a tic disorder. Transient, there's a condition called transient tic disorders, but they're by nature self-limiting and disappear.
If the diagnosis of Tourette syndrome is made, is there any treatment for it?
Yeah, there is treatment. It's in this condition. There's a balance between the adverse effects of medicine and the benefit. So it depends on how severe the tics are. Some people's tics, you live with it. It's a personal choice. It depends on how bad it is. Some tics are very socially embarrassing, and that's a problem. Some tics cause pain because the same muscle is being used over and over again.
From your experience in your practice, have you ever heard anybody getting help by behavior modification techniques?
I hear about it, but the more systematic studies don't support anything as actually being effective other than medicine. And the medicines we have are not great for treating this. I mean, they can be very effective, but they all have...
Can Tourette's get worse with time or better with time?
It can get worse. It can be either. There's a tendency for tics to get milder over time. If we look at people who are between 10 and 20 versus 20 to 30 and on each decade, we see the tics are a little milder with each decade. So that does happen. But there are also cases where the tics get worse.
Are there some kids who get a movement disorder that looks like Tourette syndrome, very close to it, and it isn't Tourette syndrome?
Well, there are other movement disorders. Well, I saw a youngster who played basketball for his high school, and in my office he would often jump up and touch the ceiling. Now, what I'm about to explain, most people don't know about it, but you'll know about it. That movement, that jumping up and touching the ceiling, doesn't look like a typical tic. Now, the way that you tell whether this is a tic or a compulsion because you can do things that are compulsive. Just another quick example. The Tourette Syndrome Association had an educational video. It was years ago. I don't know if they still use this one, but on that tape, there's a brother and sister with Tourette syndrome, and the boy is younger than his sister. And at one point, while they're being interviewed, while she's talking, he makes motions like this towards her head, doesn't hit her, towards her shoulder, and towards her waist. Now, just looking at that, you can't tell whether that is a compulsive act, because it's the typical tic is a quick movement of a small part of the body, a twitch, eye blink. But a compulsion involves some harm avoidance. In other words, like hand washing compulsions are done because I'm afraid that I am going to contaminate people, that I have germs on me, and I have to wash my hands 100 times a day, 2,000 times a day, whatever. I'm doing that for a purpose. The youngster who jumped up and touched the ceiling, I asked him why he was doing it. Now, if he told me he was doing this because his mother was going to die if he didn't, that would have been a compulsion. He was doing it because there was pleasure. I had another young lady who noticed a cabinet door in my office open, and she went over and closed it, and she told me that she does this all the time at home, and it drives her family crazy. She keeps doing it. She would close drawers and closet doors. I also asked her what would happen if she didn't do it, and she said she liked it. She was glad when she would find a door open. So that was a tic. It's what we call a complex tic. It's not that typical twitch. So some behaviors can be compulsions. There also are other neurologic conditions that are not tics. I mentioned that tics are stereotyped. A writhing movement that could be more fluid and it's not always the same one. That could be something called chorea. So there are neurologic movement disorders. There are behaviors that are such as compulsions. So they're not all tics.
Can stress make Tourette syndrome worse?
Okay, well that's a great question. Yes, it can make it worse transiently while you're under stress. It doesn't make the disorder worse.
Makes the symptoms worse
for
that moment.
For the period of time. The Tourette Syndrome Association has support groups, so there's a collection of people with Tourette syndrome. They often go home, and their tics are much worse. They get stimulated by each other, but it's worse for a little while.
Is there any truth that strep plays in some of these movement disorders?
Yes, it's a very interesting finding. The strep organism has a protein code that has some similarity